You're eventually going to get to a point where it's time to start painting. Now, for the skin tone, I've already pre-mixed a bunch of the colors that I want. So I've got that skin tone, I've got a darker skin tone, and you want to have these ready and off to the side. But before you even start to apply paint, the first thing you're going to do is apply a layer of water. So I'm just going in for water. I'm just going to apply some water, and that's really all I'm doing for this first layer. Okay, this is going to be a wet on wet technique, which means the water obviously is making the paper wet, so the paper is wet, but then the paint that we're about to apply over here is also wet. Sometimes we do a wet on dry, which means the wet paint is going onto dry paper, which is kind of like what I'm doing right now. So now the next step is to apply the paint onto paper that's already wet. So we're prepping it by getting this all nice and wet. It's also going to thin out the color, because what you don't want to have happen is to have your skin color appear super orange. For this, you'll also want a paper towel ready. So I've got my paper towel over here ready to go, because you're going to have to do some drying off. All right, now I'm going to start to apply my base skin color. At first it's going to seem really dark, so I'm going in for my skin color over here. I'm just going to put a little bit on here. And really what it's going to appear at first, you're like, oh my goodness, I made this way too dark. But as you start to thin it out, as you start to go around the entire face and use all the water that you've already applied, it's going to actually thin it out. Now if it starts to look too yellowy, obviously you take a little bit more orange, just a little dot of it, and you start to mix that around. Again, at first you're like, oh my goodness, I just ruined this thing. What happened? I made it way too dark. But you actually didn't. It's going to appear dark at first, but since it's a wet on wet technique, it's going to thin it out. So the water is the key. If you don't use enough water, yes, your person might turn too orangey, or your person might turn too yellowy. So it really is a matter of going in and trusting that it's going to be too dark to start. It's going to freak you out. You're going to wonder, what did I just do to this thing? But as you start to blend it around, as you start to use the entire area, you're going to notice the color is going to change into more of a skin tone that's going to be more appropriate for what you're looking for. So it's starting to change into a color that I like. It's not super orangey, but what you might notice here is I'm starting to get these little puddles, right? So the way we get rid of puddles is we dry off our paintbrush, and when a paintbrush is dry, it actually is going to suck up all of the extra. Can you see what happened to the nose there? So now, instead of the paintbrush applying paint, it's actually removing paint. Got a little in the eye there, not a big deal. It's all going to be things we'll be going over. So now it is taking away the extra. And I've got a good base layer here. This is a good layer of paint that I can start with and start to realize, what do I need to do to make it look like there's actual shadows and make it look like my face is a little more 3D. So that'll be my base tone. And then I'm going to start to think about how can I make it look more 3D using value.